All right, welcome back everybody to Fatherhood, the series where we celebrate Black dads and the many ways they show up for their families. In today's episode, we're talking with fathers who are raising children with special needs and disabilities. From the moment of diagnosis to the everyday highs and lows, they open up about what the journey really looks like, the challenges, the growth, and the love that keeps them going. This is an honest, heartfelt look at parenting through a different lens. To help me unpack this experience, I'm sitting down with some amazing fathers who are walking this road and showing us what real advocacy looks like. Today with us, we have the owner of Shabazz Fitness, Mr. Raheem Shabazz, the owner of Just Pest Control, Mr. Jason Warren,
Thank you.
recording artist and pastor, Courtney Franklin, and we have stay-at-home dad, Mr. Raymond Wade. Gentlemen, how y'all doing?
Doing well,
Great.
doing well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Well, look, we got a lot to discuss. So let's just go ahead and dive right into the conversation, shall we?
Yes, sir. Sure.
All right. So the first topic that we want to talk about is your journey as fathers, right? So I would love to hear from you guys. How did you first learn about your child's diagnosis, and what are some of the emotions that you went through in that moment?
Well, the first time I experienced that is when my son was about 2. He was slow to walk, and we had got diagnosed that he may have autism. And they got him into physical therapy, and we had some doctors to tell us some really bad things about this, like you got a place for him to stay. You may not be able to take care of him. He may not be able to, take a bath, help himself. And I looked at them, I said, man, you don't know who I know. I know God, Doc. I said, that's gonna be a great man. I said, so just let me do what I do, and we'll talk about it later. Sure. And years later, here we are. He's got some limitations, but nothing like they said he would have.
Love it.
Yes, sir.
Love it. What about you?
A story similar, kinda. So my wife had our son 2 months early, premature.
Okay.
And immediately we knew something was wrong. He was non-responsive, black, blue, purple, just horrible. And we got the diagnosis after our 60-day stint in the NICU. So when we were leaving, they said, oh, by the way, he has cerebral palsy. And one of you is never gonna go back to work because he's also very seizure prone.
Wow.
So that's how we found out. Yeah. And it's been a tumultuous ride since then. But
what was your initial reaction when they told you? I mean, you said that you were walking out and they just kind of dropped that on you on the way out.
Well, I was heartbroken before that because for 7 days, there was no response beyond brain and heart. So every organ was not working. His fluids was building up in his body. And I didn't tell my wife. I did not let her know what was going on for the first 4 days. I took all the blows, all the bad news, all the blah, blah, blah. And it was hard. I remember day 3 going home. I had my brother to just drive me home, and I went to take a bath for the first time in 3 days. And I cried for the first 30 minutes in the bathtub. I just finally snapped because I was trying to be He-Man for my wife.
Yeah.
And it was just horrible, man. It's horrible. Emotionally, I was not good.
Yeah. God bless you, man.
Exactly.
What about you, Shabazz?
I would say my situation may not be as typical because when my wife and I got together, she had 2 kids. I had my 1 son, and both of her kids were special needs. One was older. She had a brain condition where she had multiple sicknesses and wound up believing there was certain permanent brain damage. And the youngest son at the time, Steve, was 9, and Steve has autism. And I went into my marriage knowing that I had 2 kids that was, that had special needs, and it really didn't bother me much because I knew going in what the situation was, and I knew also I'm gonna just shower them with all kind of love.
Yeah.
And knowing that going in, knowing that there would be challenges along the way. They had already overcome so much before my wife and I even got together. And my mindset was, with God, with faith, our guidance, they're going to continue to overcome. All we had to do was guide them the right way, knowing that it wouldn't be typical, but it would be a challenge, but we were up for the challenge. And because it was easy for us as far as we knew that we would just shower them with love, because that's the type of people that we were. You know what I mean? So it was a challenge, but our faith was strong, and we just walked right into it. You know, so yeah, we're doing all right.
Good. Raymond?
Okay, well, I didn't find out till my daughter probably was in first grade, kindergarten, first grade.
Okay.
We kept getting these reports when she was in school that she had problems with, you know how people say, give me 50 feet. You know, she had violated everybody's personal space, would be rubbing it in her hair and all this other stuff. So we kept hearing that, and we took her to the doctor, and the doctor, I think on 2 or 3 occasions, called her a chatty Cathy. So, you know, we was like, well, you know, that's it. There's something not right, because we noticed it at home too, how you know, up in our space she is, and you know, things of that nature, how much she likes to talk, and at the same time, you don't want to take the spirit of the child out of the child,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
you know. But you have to pay attention to, you know, if I always say, if more than one person says something about a certain subject, I'm going to pretty much take it to the bank, you know, that it's going to be true. So we found her a good therapist and, you know, psychiatrist, and you know, we explained to them that, you know, she needs help, and if she needs medicine, then by all means, you know, let her have it. But we also don't want her, you know, I grew up in the time of Ritalin, you know, where the kids would just sit in the classroom and be zombies, you know, so we didn't want that for her, you know, because she's a great kid. She's 17 now, and you know, her GPA is a high 3. She just got accepted to the Honor Society. She wants to go to the University of Memphis, you know, so she's a great kid, but it takes a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? You know, like everybody else said, you know, just love and, you know, understanding.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of parents, you know, see bad behavior in their children, and instead of looking deeper into the situation, they would rather cuss at them and beat on them, you know.
Yeah.
And you can't beat your kid into submission all the time.
Exactly.
Right.
You know?
And you know, you're right. It does take a lot of love, and I think patience as well.
Yeah.
Because my wife and I, our oldest daughter has ADHD as well.
Yes.
And we kind of found out in a similar way to you, Raymond. You know, people, you know, multiple sources telling us things about our daughter that were very similar.
Yeah.
And it was behavior that we noticed as well. But you know, especially with girls, you know, you have to be soft, you have to be patient, and so it has been. At first, it was a pretty trying time, but you know, it's still the same little girl that we've always known, right?
Exactly.
We just have to be cognizant of what she's going through and what she's dealing with, and be able to meet her there in a soft and patient way.
Exactly.
So thank you all for sharing that.
But
And yeah, go ahead, please.
like you said, I think that's one thing we need to bring up too, the wives, how much we buffer a lot of things from them to kind of absorb the blow, is what I'm calling it.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, my wife had a real hard time of, was it me? Did I do something wrong?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I ate this. I ate that. I fed him something wrong.
Yeah.
No, I remember you pureeing everything, you know. So let's just back up, assess the situation, absorb the blow, and let's just move on. Because wives take it really hard that it was something I did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's
And
not.
then I've seen on the flip side, I would just encourage every parent to not be in denial,
Yes.
No question.
because there's a side that makes them feel guilty, and there's condemnation, but then there's another flip side of that where people see all of these signs and hear about it saying something's not right, and because it's their baby, then they
Ignore
live
it.
in denial, and denial is delay for treatment.
It is.
So you need to make sure it's better to be safe than sorry. Get it checked out, get it tested, so that something can be done before it's way out of whack, and now embarrassment causes you not to have the child a social life at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Courtney, and I think that's a good segue into the next portion of the conversation. Sure. The day-to-day realities, right? So what are some of the unique challenges that y'all face as fathers, that have kids living with disabilities or special needs? What does that look like for you?
The key word that has been brought up twice is patience.
Yep.
And because sometimes, we're hit with surprises quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it takes a great deal of patience to say, okay, I'm not gonna react too fast to this. Let me diagnose this a little bit. Let's see what's going on. Let me take a whole lot of time to let me breathe. Let's get through this. You know what I mean? I have the luxury of having my facility at my home. So all of my athletes that I train, all of my clients that I train, they come to my house. We have a 2,000 square foot facility, have space outside. Now, Steve is 26 now. Steve works, he knows his schedule inside and out. And when Steve is off, he still has his routine, his schedule.
Oh, yeah.
But every now and then, while I'm in there working, Steve pops in. And so I can't get mad at my man for, man, you see me work? Never. I stop everything. Everybody knows Steve. Everybody shouts Steve out. I call Steve the GOAT. Everybody knows he's the GOAT. The GOAT is here. What's up, Steve? You know what I mean? And whatever issue it is, whatever situation, whatever conversation we need to have right then, we have it. That happens quite a bit, but I count it as a blessing because if a special needs child lets you in, you're in. And when early on in my wife's in our marriage, Steve was 9. Now he's 26. And I'm the only dad he's ever known since he was that age. Mm-hmm. So any surprises that comes up, he's comfortable enough coming to Dad. Dad, what is this? Dad, what's up with this? Dad, what can I do about this? Dad, what I need to do about this? And I don't care what it is. Steve doesn't have a filter. So he's gonna ask, and I don't mind because that's my man. Yeah. And like I said, a great deal of patience, a great deal of you got to be thoughtful. You have to be considerate. You got to be compassionate. I mean, you have to because you're dipping into a world that most people just won't take the time to understand. Yeah. And so when you make the attempt to understand, and I know all these brothers can agree that it takes so much effort. Yeah. Sure. That's another word. A lot of effort, a lot of patience, but everyday things like that, we hear with surprises every now and then. And I didn't mention that we have a grand, Callie.
Okay.
Callie is 5. Callie is nonverbal autistic also. But the great thing about us having Steve is that we recognized the symptoms of Callie very early. And we knew the situation, we nurtured it. She lives with us, Steve lives with us, Brittany lives with us. And we take every day, day to day, you know what I mean? And like I said, I keep going back to this word, patience, a lot of it. But it's a blessing that once they let you in, you're in. And they trust you enough to know where their source comes from, where their comfort comes from. So those are the type of things that we deal with every day.
So patience and effort, those are two things, right? But there is a such thing as pouring from an empty cup. Right. So where do you find the strength and the balance to keep it all together?
Patience. Let's get back to that. I didn't have that at first. I was dead head on. And what I mean by head on, okay, we're gonna get this. Playboy, you're gonna just have to play the role. You're gonna have to come on. My wife, every once in a while, would just tell her, hey, I think you might need to take a walk because it's some father and son time, finna be some furniture moving up in here. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Especially when I know and you just playing on it. Mm-hmm. Let's go and handle this business. My neighbor used to laugh. They used to hear me in the backyard. Hey man, your lines ain't straight. Cutting grass. Everybody, he don't need to be cutting grass. Stop pampering this boy. He's growing to be a man. I told you from the jump, he's a special dude. He got to learn manhood, men work. That's what I'm teaching. But at the same time, you got to give that love too, to let him know, I'm just not being hard on you. I'm just showing you what you have to do. Now, look at him. It's a blessing. People come to our house now, he want to be the first one greeter. Hey, Uncle June. Hey, Uncle Red. You know, it's a beautiful thing to see that.
We had to teach our daughter that, you know, it may seem, you know, it may seem a little crazy, you know, but you have to go through life as my parents raised me. All they told me was I have 3 strikes against me. One of them is I'm an African American, I'm a male, and I can't see. Other than that, you know what I'm saying? The sky is the limit, but I have to work super hard.
Yeah.
Super hard. You know, and there's gonna be some times when you get down about it. I sometimes I get down about it. Being visually impaired sucks. You know, really bad. When you got other people, you know, riding around the street in their cars, and I'm walking and I'm crossing the street, and there's you know, these people, they're not really paying attention to me and my little river white cane over here. So I've been ran over like 3 times.
Ooh, wow.
You know, but you know, we have to tell her that it's no stigmatism. That's what I think a lot of people see a disability as a stigmatism, and it's only a stigmatism if you let it be.
Yeah.
You know, you can't let anything hold you down, because that's what they expect.
Yeah.
That's what they want you to do, especially African Americans. You know, let's just, you know, be real about it. They expect African Americans to really not produce a whole lot and to live under these labels that they put on your children, or on our children. You know, oh, they have ADHD, so they're not very intelligent. Oh, he's visually impaired, so you can't do this, that, and the third.
Yeah.
You know, so it has to be, you have to not look at it as a stigmatism or something that you've done wrong, you know, to deserve, you know, the child that you have.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? God, however you look at it,
Picked us.
Absolutely picked us.
He picked us.
You
Because
know,
I tell people all the time, this is a special treat. And what I mean by that is, everybody ain't blessed to have one.
Brother, I cannot agree more.
I'm telling you, everybody ain't blessed to have one.
That's right.
So when you get one, he gave them to you for a reason.
Yeah.
He gave them to you because he knew you could handle it.
Yep.
And he put something in all of us
Yeah.
as men, because I have seen so many women alone, and their husband or boyfriend or whoever walked away.
Because their child has special needs.
Exactly.
They don't want to deal with it. That's right.
So if this forum that we're in right now could touch one dude to say, man, let me go back.
It's worth it.
Man, it's worth every bit of it.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know what blessing you're missing out on. Moms can do some things, but dad can push them a whole lot further.
Yeah.
And my wife and I see that.
Please let me speak on that.
Yes, sir.
When my wife and I got together, it was interesting that, and I go back to an example with Steve. I remember like it was yesterday. Steve jumping up and down on the couch, watching TV, watching cartoons. Brittany in the other room looking like, hey man, this is just what Steve do. My wife in the bedroom just like, babe, this is just what he do. I walked in that room, I said, hey boy,
There you go.
sit down.
Thank you.
And we've been good ever since. And Steve looked at me, he said,
Exactly.
and set us behind down. I believe wholeheartedly the biggest blessing that God gave to us was to allow us to be fathers.
Yes.
And I mean, and to be able to do it with a special needs child.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna tell you how smart this one is. He's sitting right over there. In the 3rd grade, I would always pop up at the school because my job was flexible. I have not missed one appointment with my kids.
Yeah.
I got 2, a daughter and a son. daughter finna be a junior at MTSU, and Josh. I would show up, he would be cutting a rug. I would step, the teachers would allow me just to step in the room. I didn't have to say anything. He up doing his thing and he see me, the first thing he do,
So good.
hold on. And the teachers is like,
Straight
what
right
just
up.
happened? I said, don't say what he can't do.
Right.
Because he know
Yeah.
who to play on.
Yeah.
I said, once he find out he can't play on you, he'll do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the teacher was blown away.
And I appreciate y'all sharing that, and that's fantastic dialogue. I'm really loving it. Courtney, I got a question for you.
Sure.
I would love to talk about the system for a moment. What are some changes that you'd like to see in society for that to make it a better environment for children with special needs or special love, as you and your wife like to refer
that's
to
our
it?
term.
I think
Yeah,
that's
we
beautiful.
don't use
Yeah.
special needs, we use special love. I think that you asked me, so I'm going to be very transparent.
Please.
In my answer, I think that if we live in the wealthiest country in the world, then more money should be allocated for children and parents who, of nothing that they've done, born into these situations.
Yeah.
I remember when my son crossed the threshold from being able to ride in my truck or my wife's car to us needing a van and to having no extra money to buy a van. And everywhere we applied for some grant or some rich couple who was donating money to this and that through a grant, we were denied. And I'm saying, but I have to get my baby to the doctor.
Yeah.
I have to, and it breaks my heart to see him in the back seat of my truck with his legs pinned because it's not enough space. And eventually my dad stepped in and bought him a van, but everybody doesn't have that luxury, right?
Right.
I wish that there could be some allocation for help. Sometimes my wife and I need to breathe.
Yeah.
My son is nonverbal and immobile. So if there's not a nurse there, our lives are put on hold.
Yeah.
And then I'm an artist. I travel all over the world singing. Sometimes my wife is there alone for multiple days at a time. She needs a break.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's money for everything under the sun except rivers of it for special love children. I think that's something that we should revisit.
And it's
Thank
hard.
you.
And
Yeah.
I add to that, it's hard to find out how do you get in different programs, even something like physical therapy, unless you know somebody that has autism with a child that can point you in the right direction. You never know.
You never know. Right.
You know, I didn't know I needed a conservatorship for my son when he turned 18. You know how I found out? By a friend of mine, that daughter had Down syndrome.
Yeah.
He said, hey man, you make sure you get that conservatorship. I said, he said, yeah. He ain't gonna be able to make decisions for himself for health.
Yeah.
I said, okay. He said, just something you need to know.
So along those same lines, what is some advice that you and all of you would give to a new parent, a new father who just found out that their child has a disability or is in need of special love?
You're pounding that pavement, and stay on your kids' teachers, when they go to school, and make sure that they're doing the proper thing, make sure your child has the IEP,
Yeah.
for extended time for taking tests and homework and whatnot, because I do understand that, school is a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a learning disability or a physical disability, it can be overwhelming. I have to get this done. And some kids don't have any concept of deadlines, and you can't pressure a kid like that.
Well, for a new father that's experienced this, the first thing I would tell him is sit in it for a minute. Sit in it for a minute.
Yeah.
Learn to absorb the blow is what I call it, and then move from there.
And it also goes back to don't deny it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Once you get to that point, I think you'll be it's going to be overwhelming, but just take it one day at a time.
One day at a time.
Yeah.
Well, look, gentlemen, this has been an amazing, amazing conversation. And as we've learned today and heard today, being a father doesn't come with a blueprint, especially when you're raising a child with special needs or in need of special love. But what these men have shown us is that with advocacy, love, and resilience, there's no limit to what our children and our fathers can overcome. Thank you to our panelists for opening up and sharing their powerful stories, and a special thanks to you at home for watching and being a part of this important conversation.